Before we begin the story of why did this little rat disappear every sunset? A heartwarming whispered tale, I invite you to get comfortable. Let the world fade for a while. If you find yourself drawn into these quiet tales, feel free to like and subscribe. It helps more stories find their way to the firelight. Now, let's begin. It always began at sunset. A little after the sky dipped gold and just before the porch light flickered on, that was when she'd call his name. Once, soft as breath, like a secret only shadows knew. And from somewhere impossible, a slipper, a drawer, even the back of the bookshelf, he'd come. Bounding, blinking, whiskers twitching with mischief, a streak of dusk and fur. Little pink feet tapping like tiny drumbeats against the old wood floor. Whisper, the rat with the velvet gray coat and the ancient eyes. Never in the same place twice. But always, always there. Until the night he wasn't. Maisie had just brushed her hair, 70 strokes, like the stories said, and the sky was the color of stewed plums. She folded her knees on the quilt and whispered the words, just like always. Come out, Cloud's king. Silence. She smiled, waited, closed one eye like it might help spot him. Listened for the sound, that tiny scrabble and squeak and bump in the drawer he always kicked open too hard. Nothing. She rose and checked his favorites. The shoebox, the tea tin, behind the ribbon spools. Nothing in the sock nest. Nothing under the space heater. Whisper? She said it out loud this time. Not the game name, just his name. It felt strange, heavier in the throat than it used to. Like pulling petals off a flower that didn't want to open. Still nothing. By dinner time, she was crawling on the carpet with a flashlight clenched in her teeth. By bedtime, the world buzzed too loud, crickets and old pipes and the stupid ticking clock that suddenly sounded like a funeral drum. But she told herself animals wander. Rats are tricky. He'd turn up tomorrow. Maybe with another ribbon or button he'd somehow pulled through the heating grate. But tomorrow came, and tomorrow went, and Whisper stayed vanished. The house noticed before the people did. The hallway, once loud with morning zoomies, stayed quiet. The faint tapping in the attic rafters stopped. Even the blankets didn't seem to settle right anymore. Too stiff, too folded. By the third night, the wind pushed strange shapes against the window. By the fifth, her mother asked casually, "Is that little rat of yours still sleeping under your bed?" Maisie touched her pocket without thinking. Nothing stirred. At school, her pencil roll was missing 2 erasers. She thought of him instantly, the little thief. Always dragging back tiny things to his pile like an old magpie. But his pile remained untouched. That night, she listened to the stairs creak as the house held its breath. Then she turned out the light and whispered again. Come out, Cloud's king. A flick in the curtain. She jolted. Nothing there. And then, just for a moment, one breath after she stopped asking, she thought she heard paw steps. But they were going away. Not under the bed, not toward the sock drawer. Away, toward something unreachable. Maisie didn't follow. Couldn't. She lay back on the pillow, arms hugging the cold space where he never really slept, and blinked up at the roof beams. There was something she hadn't noticed before, a tiny bundle tied with thread, stuck between the rafters. Too small to see unless you were looking for it. When she rose to reach it, it was gone. As if it had never been there. And all through the house, every drawer and curtain lay still. Except one, which twitched in a room with no breeze. And behind it, nothing. Just dusk. Spring always came late on that street. Snow clung stubbornly to the gutters like it didn't trust the thaw. But the crocuses came first, white and purple, tiny cups in the yard, and Maisie noticed herself smiling at them. She hadn't smiled in weeks. She was walking home from school with her backpack catching every branch when she saw the pet shop. Not the one her mom liked. A smaller one, tucked between a closed bakery and an antiques place that always smelled of clocks. It was raining, the good kind. Glossy and soft. A ribboned drizzle. She ducked inside. Not to buy anything, just to breathe in that animal hay kind of smell that always made her forget what had hurt her. There were aquariums humming. A bird or two, softly muttering. In the back, in a stacked row of bins too tall for eye level, something moved. She almost didn't look. But then she did. And that's when she saw him. Gray, half-curled, just a hint of pink tail. Quiet, not frantic, like the others pawing at the sides. Just watching her. And Maisie, who had come in looking for bedding for a class hamster she didn't even like, stepped close to the bin and reached up before she stopped to think. She didn't ask the clerk. She didn't bring a cage. She just waited for the girl behind the counter to argue with someone in the back room. And in that hollow space of nobody listening, she slid the lid open just enough. Slipped one hand in. He didn't bite. Didn't even flinch. Just curled closer to her palm, so light it made her throat ache. She tucked him under her coat like a secret and walked through the rain as if the world had pulled in tighter. By the time she opened her front door, her sweater was damp and he'd licked her wrist once. She whispered, "You're okay now," and thought maybe she was, too. She named him that night, after the way he moved, soft, certain, always listening. Whisper. He wouldn't eat the wrong seeds. Wouldn't step near the closet where her father's old toolbox lived. But he slept in her elbow crook by morning. And when he dreamt, he made tiny clicking sounds, like he was remembering puzzles. Maisie made him a paper crown the day after she built his first maze from cereal boxes. He wore it for exactly 3 seconds before stealing it, shredding it into his next nest like he'd always planned to rule that way. He didn't answer to anything but the dusk call. "Come out, Cloud's king." And slowly, the attic became his kingdom. He knew her secret hideaways before she said a word. Once, she lost her favorite ribbon, the one that smelled of orange peel and costume boxes. She found it curled beside Whisper's food bowl 2 nights later. And another time, he tugged a drawing from the back of her desk drawer, made when she was 7, in crayon and slanted letters. She hadn't seen it in years. She found it resting across his bed of tissues, right next to a snapped pencil she hadn't even known was missing. Maisie didn't ask how he knew. She just whispered, "You're weird," and kissed the top of his head. Sometimes, though, she wondered. Rats don't remember childhood, do they? They can't know what a satin shoe meant at age 5, or why the smell of laundry made her cry after her dad moved out. They can't, and yet. Whisper came close when days were hardest. Never crawling, always appearing, like a breath she hadn't noticed herself take. When she told her mother, "I don't think anyone gets how lonely I feel," he was there 2 seconds later, nose nudging the zipper of her jacket. She didn't have to explain it to him. That autumn, he started building something new. Not a nest. Not really. It was behind the lowest drawer in her desk, tucked behind the paneling. Maisie only found it because of the silver thread leading from her sock to the wall crack. Inside, 2 paper clips, 4 buttons, one of them hers, the torn edge of her diary's bookmark, and a bead from her old pencil case. She didn't take them back. She just whispered, "Okay, keep them." And every few weeks, the collection changed. Until one day, she found nothing new. Instead, just one thing. A marble. Green, swirled like ocean glass. And next to it, a dried wildflower stem from the slope behind their school, the one no one walked except her when she needed quiet. She ran a finger along the stem's crinkle and felt something shift in her chest. Like a drawer opening. Or a door. Summer made the attic golden. Sunlight pooled on the wooden floorboards in long, sleepy stripes, and Maisie started counting time differently, not by dates, but by how long Whisper took to find her favorite hiding spots. Some weeks, he was slow. A prince wrapped in sleep and dreams. Other days, he moved with such purpose it felt like he knew things before they happened. They still played most evenings. She'd tap the floor once with her heel, soft, a heartbeat, and somewhere in the hush, he'd tap back. Like Morse code between the living and the nearly magic. Maisie started keeping a notebook. Not of drawings or homework, but of where he vanished. June 4th. Behind dollhouse, under roof slope. June 9th. Inside old pillowcase, matched pattern. June 22nd. Disappeared mid-game. Reappeared with dust. Sometimes, he didn't wait for her to call him. He'd be gone before sunset. Gone before she even unfolded the quilt and sank onto her bed. And when he vanished early, Maisie found signs later. A thread on the windowsill. A tiny whisker by the rim of her cocoa mug. Once, a piece of bark from a tree that had burned down 3 years ago. By accident, she started whispering good nights into empty corners, just in case. Not every rat, she thought, needs to be seen to be felt. But by mid-July, Whisper moved slower. He'd nap longer in the drawer lined with old scarves. His coat less velvet, more soot. Maisie noticed his whiskers drooped when he sniffed, like they'd grown heavy with things unspoken. She told herself not to worry. Rats grew old. Whisper was just resting more. He still played, sometimes. Still stole socks and bits of gum wrapper like a tiny dragon hoarding treasure. But beneath that, something thinning. Fading at the edges. It became a ritual. The evening roll call. She'd light a lavender candle. Fold her knees beneath her. Say the name. Come out, Cloud's King. A pause. A long hush. Then, most nights, he'd come racing from somewhere ridiculous. Once, inside a pocket of a coat she hadn't worn in years. Another time, from a vase with no flowers. Each time, she'd laugh. Each time, her heart would sting. Because sometimes, the pause before he came felt too long. One morning, she found his special corner undisturbed. The drawer behind her desk, where he left his offerings. No change. No new treasure. Just dust and a single button. Blue. Small. She didn't remember it being hers. Her hand trembled when she touched it. She waited 3 days. Called his name every dusk. He came only once, late, slow, eyes glassier than she'd ever seen. He climbed onto her pillow and pressed into her neck. Not to play, not to sleep, but like he was listening for something. Or maybe sharing it. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept her palm open beside her head in case he wanted to curl in again. But he didn't come back. He didn't come back after breakfast, or lunch, or even after she dropped a bit of her muffin exactly where he liked best. The drawer stayed silent. The attic empty. She pulled out his maze pieces. Spread them like cards across the floor. Waited for the sound. But Maisie was the only one making noise now. Later, when she sat with her back to the wall and knees pulled tightly to her chest, she noticed something strange. A shadow where there shouldn't be one. Thin, rat-shaped, moving under the bookshelves like light made solid. She reached out. Nothing there. Just the smallest warmth left behind, the way your cheeks feel a second after someone almost kissed them. And in that same breath, a faint smell of orange peel, familiar and old. That night, Maisie didn't whisper the calling words. Just lay very still and listened. And somewhere in the quiet, far past the rafters, she thought she heard him building. Not a nest. Not a hiding place. Something else. Something waiting. It rained the night he didn't return. Not a storm, just a steady, breath-like drizzle that nose tapped against the window and made the world outside look like glass. Maisie brushed her hair 70 times, like the stories said, and watched the street lamp flicker gold against the fog. She folded onto the quilt, knees up, candlestem glow touching one cheek, and whispered the words like spellwork. "Come out, Cloud's King." Silence. No squeak. No scrabble. Just the clink of the radiator and the soft, wool-wrapped hush of waiting. She waited longer this time. Smiling at first, then fidgeting, then not smiling at all. After a while, she crawled. Lifted the sock drawer. Checked behind the coat heap. Tapped softly on the floorboards where he'd once hidden under a hat box from 3rd grade. Empty. All of it. She sank onto the carpet, flashlight clenched between her teeth, mouth tasting of batteries. Looked under the dresser. Behind the velvet chair. Even inside the vase again, foolish hope yawning quiet in her ribcage. No whisper. No anything. By midnight, she was tired in the bones, still, raw, uncomfortable in every position she tried. Her cheeks felt hollow from holding so many expressions in case he appeared: surprise, laughter, scolding, relief. Instead, the house held its breath. Curtains unmoving. Quilt too neatly folded. Spoons in their drawers like no one had touched them in weeks. She curled up under the desk. Held a scarf that still smelled like him. Old paper and cinnamon. And cried the kind of quiet tears no one tells you how to stop. By morning, she was empty of something. Not sadness, it was too early for that. But the thing before it. The hover. The weight. Her breakfast tasted like paste and the milk was too cold. Her mother didn't ask. Never did. But the question floated in the house like steam off tea. Later, when the wind picked up sharp and sidelong, it pushed shapes against the window. Shifting gray patterns. Not trees. Not clouds. She stared at them until they blurred. By the 3rd day, Maisie stopped calling. She still waited. Still looked. Still left out the cocoa bits he liked best, but the evening ritual changed. Became a silence instead of a summoning. Sometimes she imagined she heard something. A tap. A flutter. She'd spin to look. Curtain still. Room stiller. A week passed this way. And then her mother asked, offhandedly over laundry, "Is that little rat of yours still sleeping under your bed?" Maisie nodded without meaning to. Like hope spoke before her mouth did. Then she touched her pocket. Nothing stirred. The next night, she lit no candles. Said no words. But she did sit on the attic floor and turned the flashlight on slow circles like a lighthouse without a boat to guide. And just as she was reaching to turn it off, something moved. Not sound. Not air. Just a flutter at the edge of seeing. A curtain shifted. No breeze. And behind it, nothing. Nothing at all. Except, as she stood up to look, a strange small weight in her chest. Like something had been rearranged. She didn't see the shape. Not clearly. But she felt, watched. Not haunted. Held. And once, just once, that week, when she closed her eyes to sleep, she saw a golden field stretch out in her mind. And a gray figure running just ahead, never looking back. Only forward. Maisie didn't talk about him. Not at first. She folded the silence like a handkerchief, neat and hidden, kept in a corner pocket no one asked about. Even though everything in the attic felt out of place. Even though the flash of dusk through the cracked window made her throat tighten in that old, impossible way. He had only been a rat. That's what her mother said, 3 weeks after. But Maisie wasn't sure that was true. She still looked for signs without meaning to. A loose thread. A button. A whisker, though she never found one again. Her fingers paused near every drawer, her ears chased sounds that didn't happen. The air just hummed differently without him. She started carrying an eraser in her pocket. Pale pink, unused. Whisper had tried to steal it once, but she'd stopped him, now she wasn't sure why. Now it felt like a promise unkept. Some afternoons, alone in the attic, she'd remake the maze. Set it out careful as clockwork, corners snug and symmetrical. Then sit. Wait. Nothing walked it. Nothing nibbled at the Cheerio bait. But it helped, somehow. As if keeping those paths clean might help her remember the ones they used to follow. At school, she didn't talk much. Her friends noticed, asked. Maisie shrugged. He's just gone, she said. They thought she meant a fish, or a cat, or even a brother's friend they hadn't known well. No one asked twice, but the silence between subjects felt heavier now. At lunch, when she peeled her orange, she always paused before the last slice. Waiting, remembering, asterisk. One morning in October, it happened. Maisie was reaching behind the radiator for a crooked pencil, and her fingers brushed something soft. A lint ball, she thought. When she pulled it out, it was a curled piece of ribbon. Burgundy, stiff-edged with dust and time. Her breath hitched. Days later, she checked the offering space again. Nothing new. Just the old wildflower stem, dried to parchment. She didn't take it. Couldn't. Asterisk. Then came the laughter. Not hers, a girl in the front yard. Playing with the neighbor's dog. Maisie leaned out the attic window and watched the sky. Sunset pooling slow, amber and ripe. And just for a second, she felt something near her ankle. A tap. Then nothing. She didn't move. Couldn't move. The touch had been too light. Too familiar. Like he'd said, I never left, but in his secret, wordless way. Later that evening, Maisie dreamed. A quilt of moss. A tiny room in a hollow tree. And there he was, not sick, not slow, bounding across a windowsill fringed in stars. He looked back once. That was all. Autumn came with the softness of old wool. Days folded in early, shadows stretching across the attic floor long before dinner. Maisie marked the evenings by what she didn't find. No skitter behind the wall. No paper crown buried in a shoe. But someone had rearranged the drawer of scarves again. She asked her mother if she'd moved them, and her mother only blinked. What would I want with scarves in a heatwave? Maisie didn't answer. She only smoothed the drawer carefully, slowly. Laid each scarf down like a memory. And one night, she found something nestled there that hadn't been there the day before. A thimble. Rusted. Familiar. Her grandmother's, maybe. Or part of a sewing kit that had long disappeared. She didn't touch it. Not then. Instead, she set a sugar cube beside it, like an offering. Just in case. The dreams became more frequent. Whisper always in movement, never looking straight at her, always just ahead. Once, he paused by a wooden gate wreathed in ivy. Nosed it open with no sound. Maisie woke with her hand stretched in sleep, fingers tingling like they'd just closed around something warm. She didn't tell anyone, didn't write it down, but the next evening, she whispered his name, not the title, not the game call. Just the name, and something shifted in the walls. Not noise, not movement, just the feeling that the space between breaths held a different weight now. Maisie began setting objects by the attic window. A button, a drawing, the mint tin he once rolled across the floor during a thunderstorm. Each time she placed something, she came back the next day to find it moved an inch. Sometimes inward, sometimes barely rotated, stillness interrupted, presence without proof. Mid-September, the weather turned. Not cold, just reluctant. Like the air was stalling, waiting for someone to catch up before shifting seasons. Maisie returned from school one afternoon to find a single sunflower petal on her pillow. No stalk, no vase, just soft golden curve on white cotton. She hadn't told anyone sunflowers were his favorite. In fact, she wasn't sure she had ever said the word out loud. But there it was, bright as memory. Light as a promise. She sat beside it for 10 whole minutes before brushing it gently into her palm. Then tucked it into the inside cover of her notebook. The next day, there was quiet again. Not emptiness, exactly, but watchful. She lit the lavender candle, laid her hands flat on the floor in front of her, and whispered, "It's okay if you're somewhere else now." Then she added, after a breath, "But if you're still here, thank you." That night, the curtain whispered. Only once. She didn't go to it. Didn't try to understand. She simply lay down, eyes open to the beams overhead, and let the quiet curl around her like a blanket. And as darkness thickened, she imagined what he might be building now. What kind of places dreamed rats made when they carried broken buttons and old thimbles into the folds that other people couldn't see? She imagined wings stitched of scarf strands, tunnels made of pencil shavings and feathers, rooms where no one cried, only listened, and a little gray figure standing in the doorway, whiskers twitching, waiting for someone brave enough to follow. Maisie closed her eyes and whispered good night. Not to the sky, not to the silence, but to the place they'd made between them, the one without a map. And thought, maybe tomorrow, she'd follow the thread. It rained the night she first dreamed of the field. Not hard, just a hush that drummed soft on the windows and pulled the world smaller, closer. Maisie fell asleep with the lavender candle still warm, her hand resting where the scarf drawer used to creak. In the dream, there were no walls. No staircase or attic light or ticking radiator. Only grass. Tall and gold, swaying like lullabies. A single silver gate stood at the edge of the horizon, half open. No fence, just the idea of a threshold. Whisper was already there, not waiting, not beckoning, just running, ears back, tail a ribbon behind him, paws light on soil like he'd always known the way. He didn't look back, but the air shimmered where he passed. Not heat shimmer, something older. Like memory turned visible. Maisie called his name, but sound didn't work here. Only knowing. And she knew, deep in her ribs, where breath lives, that he wasn't running away from her. He was running toward something. Something he'd been building with buttons and thread and the lint from forgotten pockets. She tried to follow. The grass brushed her calves. Bees hummed along the hillsides. There were flowers here she hadn't seen since childhood, chalky bluebells, clover with heart-shaped leaves, and something that might have been the wild strawberry from her father's old garden. Whisper disappeared over a low rise. Behind him, the world smelled like orange peel and old books, like rain on notebook paper. She crested the hill, and there was the house. Not hers, not yet, but familiar. A place pulled from stories and blanket forts. Roof sloped like a smile. A light in every window. No door, because there wasn't a need for one. She stepped inside without stepping. Whisper was curled at the hearth. Not sleepy, not waiting, just there. Whole, bright, not like before. He looked up as if to say, "I knew you'd come." Then vanishing, not like smoke or ghosts or lost dreams. More like fog lifting from fields. Like something sacred finishing its sentence. Maisie woke with a hand outstretched. Not empty, not quite. Because where her hand rested, tucked between mattress seam and night's breath, was a leaf. Just one. Green, nearly translucent, veined with a shimmer that no real tree had the grace to grow. She didn't tell her mother. Didn't write it down. But from that day on, the attic felt warmer somehow. Not loud, not busy, just filled with a hush that understood her. And each evening, as sunset painted the beams gold and violet, she no longer called his name. She simply sat, and waited. And if ever a breeze stirred the curtain, not once, not twice, but just a flick, she'd smile a little. Not because she thought he'd come back, but because, somewhere, he already had. Maisie didn't go to the attic for days. It wasn't a decision, more like forgetting on purpose. Like how you don't open a letter when you already know what it says. Autumn thickened on the windows. And time began to lose its corners. At dinner, her fork moved through air more than food. At school, she wrote her name wrong twice on the same quiz. Her teacher asked if she was tired. She nodded, but tired wasn't the right word. There was a space inside her now, like the shape of something that had been removed but still hummed. She didn't open the maze drawer. Didn't touch his teacup bed. But she kept a sugar cube on the windowsill. Just one. Some evenings, her dreams took her halfway to that hill before dissolving into mist. Other nights, nothing. And then, one Tuesday, after a math test and a cold lunch, she came home to find the curtain moved. No breeze. The window was closed. Still, a slow sway. Once, twice, still. She touched the fabric and felt it, not cold. Not even cool. Warm, like a cheek just kissed. That night, she climbed into bed without brushing her hair. No candle. No whisper. But her eyes didn't close for a long time. When they did, the field was already waiting. The gate was open wider now. The grasses shorter, swept. She didn't call him. Didn't run. She walked. Wind whispered through the stalks. A sound like secrets being agreed upon. Ahead, just at the tree line, he waited. Not bounding. Not busy. Still. He looked older now. Not in body, his fur gleamed silver gray and whole, but in the way he stood. Like a story who'd learned how to end. Maisie reached for him. He didn't step back, but he turned, walked beside her this time. They passed a stream made of glimmering ink. Trees with bells for leaves. A hill sculpted from forgotten toys. She kept wondering when he'd pull ahead again. When she'd reach for him and he'd vanish. But he didn't. He stayed. And then the path shifted, narrowing, curling like a ribbon through moonlit clover, and at its end, there was a stone. Flat. Small. Embedded just enough in the earth to not move. One word scratched on its surface. Whisper. No dates. No lines. Just that. Maisie sank to her knees. Not crying. Not breaking. Just still. The rat at her side pressed close. No sound. No need. He leaned once. Against her ribs. Then stepped forward. Entered the low mist, lit from inside like memory. She didn't try to stop him. Didn't call. Only watched. He paused once. Looked back once. And disappeared. Maisie woke with hands folded over her chest, palms warm like they'd been wrapped around something. She didn't speak for a long time. Downstairs, her mother called her name softly. She answered, quietly, in a minute. Then she sat up, smoothed the quilt, and saw it there, a tiny crown of torn paper. Placed just at the edge of the windowsill. Waiting. Maisie didn't go looking. She'd walked every inch of the attic, every drawer, cranny, and floorboard hollow. She'd whispered until her throat ached. Waited until dusk curled into midnight, and still, nothing. So one quiet Sunday, she stopped searching and started remembering. She found an old shoebox beneath the bed, creased at the corners, printed with faded pink flowers, edges softened by years of dust. She lined the bottom with tissue from last winter's present box. Not his real nest, she thought. But safe enough. Then she began placing things. A folded square of orange ribbon. A drawing of a star he'd once nibbled the edge from. 2 seeds from his favorite cereal, a rare treat, always stolen. And, last, the tiniest note. I'll play again. Call when it's sunset. She didn't sign it, just tucked it in, light as a breath. Closed the lid. Tiptoed to the farthest reach of the attic, where the beams dipped low and the raincoats hung untouched, and slid the box behind the mothbox crate. She whispered, not loud, not for the room to hear. Goodbye. Then she left. Didn't look over her shoulder. Didn't wait for the curtain to move or for the hush to shift. Just stepped down the attic stairs. And didn't go back, not that fall, not that year. Time moved like honey, slow, sticky, sweet in some places, too heavy in others. Maisie learned how to walk through the house without stepping over mazes that weren't there. She taught herself not to reach into pockets expecting the clever weight of paws. And still, sometimes, over cereal, or when passing the bookshelves, she half-turned. For no reason. Just habit. He'd been gone long enough that memories stopped stinging. Long enough that they started to glow instead. The attic stayed closed. The curtain stayed still. And life, as it stubbornly does, kept going. Maisie didn't go up again until something else vanished. Not a pet this time. A person. Her mother. It was winter when the call came. Peaceful, they said. She had gone in her sleep. No pain. Just a quiet slipping away. Maisie came back alone. Stepped into the house with her coat still zipped. Cold seeped into her socks long before grief reached her eyes. She walked room by room as if collecting shadows. Touched wallpaper she hadn't seen in 5 apartments and 2 jobs. The attic door stuck, just a little. She pressed harder. Climbed one slow step at a time, flashlight in one hand, the smell of old paper guiding her. The dust was untouched, but the air felt warm. She moved toward the far corner, not quite looking, but not avoiding, either. Her fingers brushed the edge of the moth box. And froze. The shoebox was missing. In its place, a tiny bundle folded in gingham cloth. She opened it carefully. Inside, nothing that should have made sense. A gum wrapper. A button from her old winter coat. A scribbled note she hadn't written. And on top of them all, something small. A pink eraser. The one she'd carried for weeks. The one he'd tried, once, to steal. It sat quiet in her palm. Maisie laughed. Not loudly, just enough for the dust to notice. Then she sat down on the attic floor. And for the first time in years, let the curtain ripple. Not from wind, just remembering. Maisie didn't expect to hear the sound. She'd been sorting boxes, old clothes, bent photo albums, a stack of letters her mother never sent. Everything smelled like cedar and thyme. The attic was dim, the sunset slipping sideways through the small round window. She wasn't looking for anything. Just touching traces of a past worn soft with disuse. Then she heard it, a tap. Not loud, not even sharp. Just a presence in sound. Like a polite knock from something that shouldn't knock. She froze, waited, then, another tap. Slower this time. Near the curtain by the bookshelf. She didn't speak, didn't call the name. Her hand lingered on the lid of the photo box, not lifting it. Tap. She rose. Quietly. Each step carefully tested like the floor might give beneath her weight. But the wood held, and so did the silence that sat atop it. She reached the curtain. It was swaying. Barely. Just enough to be noticed. Maisie touched the fabric. Warm. No window open. She stepped behind it. Nothing. No creature scurried. No breeze escaped through a vent. Just a stillness that felt like it was trying not to disturb her. Then she saw it. On the floor beside the bookshelf. A woven basket, smaller than her hand. Round, frayed slightly at the rim, dust threaded through the weave. Inside, a trail of grain. And at the edge, a chewed piece of soft red scarf. Just enough to count as a memory. Too small to be a mistake. She knelt, reached in. The seeds smelled of age, but fresh at their heart. As if someone had left them minutes ago. The scarf thread was warm. She didn't understand. Didn't need to. She sat back, cross-legged. Placed one hand lightly beside the basket and whispered, "I kept your box too." Then fell silent. The attic listened. Downstairs, a bird flitted across the window. Dishes shifted faintly in the sink. And up in the numbered hush of the attic, Maisie closed her eyes. For one full heartbeat, she was 12 again. For the next, she was older, but not alone. She stayed that way for a while. Long enough for the light to change. Long enough for nothing else to move. And when she finally stood up, she left the basket there. Didn't take the scarf piece. Didn't disturb the seeds. Whatever it meant, or didn't, was enough just the way it was. Maisie didn't tell him about the rat right away. He was 5, the age of giggles too loud and stories too big for books. The attic was a ship, then a train, then a castle, depending on what the clouds looked like that day. She let him play among the old boxes. Laid down rules gently but firmly, no running, no fingers in the heater grates, and always ask before touching something tucked away. He didn't always listen, but he always remembered the attic was a special kind of quiet. One you whispered into. And then, one Wednesday in spring, he mentioned the rat. Not a scary rat, he added quickly, sorting colored paper on the floor. He's nice, small, fast. Maisie's breath caught. Where did you see him? He shrugged like it didn't matter. Library box. He was hiding in the atlas. Said I was doing good. She blinked. He said, well, I heard it. In my ear. But not out loud. She didn't ask any more questions. That night, when she tucked him in, she asked gently, does he come every day? Just some. He rolled onto his side, frowning thoughtfully. Can't find him if you chase. You have to wait. And then he waits back. Maisie kissed his forehead. That sounds about right. The next day, he brought her a button. From the rat, he said. I think. It was red with a rim chipped like a bitten lip. She held it carefully. It felt familiar, though she couldn't say why. She started noticing patterns. His pencil case would shift places. Always a few inches closer to the attic stairs after stories ended. The library drawer rattled faintly when she lit her candle. One morning, she found her son sitting cross-legged by the curtain, whispering. What are you saying? She asked. He looked over his shoulder. Told him I liked the story. The one about the crown and the socks. Maisie smiled. He liked that one, too. Another week passed. More stories. More buttons. A string with one knot drifted onto her pillow. Every time she asked where it came from, he shrugged. Just there. And then, one rainy afternoon, he asked her the question. Was the rat yours first? Maisie froze. He glanced up from his drawing. He told me you played the hiding game. Before. She nodded. Yes. A long time ago. I think he still plays it, he said, after a beat. But he's better now. Better how? He doesn't always hide to disappear. Sometimes he hides so you find yourself. She didn't speak after that. Just watched him color blue over a hilltop in green crayon. That night, as the attic whispered in its sleep, Maisie left a sugar cube by the curtain. Not because she expected anything. Only to say, I still remember. And she did. The boy found the tale first. Just a glimpse of it, dipped beneath the page of a heavy dictionary. He was standing on the stool by the attic bookshelf, looking for a picture of a volcano. Instead, the page rustled, and something gray flicked behind it. He didn't jump, didn't even flinch, just leaned closer and whispered, Hey, I see you. The tale vanished properly then, dart fast. Later, at dinner, he told Maisie like it was weather. There's a rat in the dictionary. He blinked at me. Maisie paused with her spoon halfway to her mouth. What color was he? Fog color. And his ears were pink but smart. Not wrinkly. He was reading, I think. Maisie smiled, barely. Did he say anything? The boy shrugged, chewing slowly. Not with a voice. But I heard him. He said, run fast, but not far. Maisie mouthed the words later that night. Ran her fingers along the spine of her old writing journal. The one Whisper once napped beside. The next day, the boy found a gum wrapper folded like a boat. It floated in the water glass on his windowsill. "Did you make this?" Maisie asked. "No, I think he left it." "Why?" The boy thought. "Maybe to say, don't drift. Go with purpose." Maisie kissed the top of his head. "That sounds wise." In the days that followed, he spoke of the rat often. Only when it was quiet. "He plays tag, but he doesn't chase me. He runs ahead. He hides in things that rhyme. Box, socks, rocks. I think it's a code. He knows when I'm upset. He puts buttons in funny places until I laugh." Maisie didn't ask for proof. There never was any. Except, the old scarf drawer once opened with all her scarves braided. A single red button marched across the hallway floor one morning. And the peppermint she left on her notebook disappeared, paper still coiled neatly like it had been unfolded by tiny paws. One night, Maisie watched her son sleep, arms sprawled, toy mouse caught in his elbow crease, and saw a small shadow at the curtain's edge. A twitch. Then stillness. She didn't call to it. Just whispered, "He's gentle. You picked well." The next morning, the boy built a maze. Books and shoeboxes, cereal lids for bridges. Maisie called up the stairs, "Need help?" "Nope," he shouted. "We're playing the slow kind of game." She found one sock on the windowsill later. Still warm. That night, when she asked what he'd dreamt, the boy rubbed his eyes and murmured, "He took me to a hill with no top. Just sky." Maisie tucked in the sheet. Smoothed his hair. "Did you go all the way up?" "No." He said, "Some places we visit 1 inch at a time." He held her hand for a beat longer than usual. She didn't pull away. When the light was out and stars began whispering through the window crack, Maisie sat by the curtain. She said nothing, did nothing, and behind her, behind boxes piled since forever, the tiniest sound echoed. Tap, tap, then hush. The stories began quietly. At first, just once a week, after teeth were brushed and socks kicked off. Maisie would lie beside her son, eyes soft in the dim light, and say something like, "Did I ever tell you about Whisper and the velvet ribbon?" He always shook his head, even if she had. So she'd begin. About the little gray rat who wore paper crowns and built mazes when no one was watching. Who collected buttons and memories like treasures, and vanished at exactly sunset, not a second before, not a second late. "He was magic?" her son asked once, voice muffled by pillow. "I don't know," she said. But he knew things no one else did. The stories came more often after that. The bedtime hour stretched, not from delay, but from the hush that stories build. Each tale quieter than the one before, threaded with small truths and tiny mysteries. "He once stole my favorite ribbon," she told him. "I thought I'd lost it. Found it in his bed the next morning." Why would he do that? To keep it safe, I think. Other stories made him laugh. Like the time Whisper climbed into a mug and wouldn't come out until Maisie played the tea kettle song. Or when he stashed 5 erasers under her pillow over a week and she thought she was being haunted by a very tidy ghost. Some nights the boy whispered back before sleep took him. "I saw him today." "Where?" "By the piano. He ducked under before I could say hi." Maisie never questioned it, only nodded and said, "If he visits you, it means your heart notices things." "Things like what?" "Things most people walk past." The boy thought about that in silence. Then once whispered, "I told him thank you. For the button game." Maisie smiled into his hair. It became tradition. Stories first. Blanket tucked under chin. The final whisper, gentle dreams, clouds king. Then sleep. Whisper was no longer only a name, or a rat, or an old memory hidden behind attic walls. He became something past, soft as fabric, light as breath, from one child's wonder to another's waiting. Sometimes the boy would add to the story. I left him a gum wrapper. He said it reminded him of stars. He doesn't like grape jelly. He borrowed my marble but brought back a shell. Each tale added a thread to the tapestry. Maisie never corrected him. She didn't need to. The stories weren't about facts. They were about remembering gently. And teaching how to see what isn't always seen. Who to trust. What to keep. Why you sometimes need to whisper before something answers. And so whisper, the little rat who vanished at sunset, stayed. Not in a cage, not in a box, but in the way the boy leaned close to listen. In the rustle of a curtain with no wind. And the hush that always, always came, just before a smile. One August evening, thick with that blue summer hush where shadows grow soft and honeyed, the boy lost his favorite toy. A tiny latchkey mouse, stuffed with rice. Named after nothing, but carried in every backpack he'd ever owned. They searched the house twice. Under couch cushions, behind the laundry basket, even in the back garden under the lavender. Nothing. He didn't cry, just furrowed his brow the way children do when hope is wobbling. Maisie knelt beside him, brushing the hair from his forehead. Maybe take a break. Let the evening settle. He nodded, quiet as dusk, then whispered, mostly to himself, he's helping. Maisie paused. Who is? He didn't look up. Whisper. She didn't say anything. Just sat beside him as the curtains turned rose-colored and the sugar cubes on the windowsill caught the last of the light. Later, they read a story. Not about whisper or ribbons or clouds. Just dragons and lanterns and quiet bravery. When she tucked him in, he whispered again. He's not hiding the toy. He's holding it for me. So I remember to notice other things. Maisie's chest ached gently. What other things? She asked. The air, and the way the floor creaks. And how the quiet feels round. She kissed his forehead. That night, they both dreamed. Not of rooms, not of searching. They dreamed of a warm wind on a golden hillside. Grasses bowed to it, not out of fear, but familiarity. Whisper ran just ahead, lighter than he'd ever been, paws barely touching ground. The boy followed, laughing, not chasing, just keeping close. Maisie's dream self watched from the hill slightly behind. Sat with knees folded, hand resting in clover, eyes soft with remembering. When they woke, the toy mouse was sitting on the edge of the boy's windowsill. Facing out, watching something no one else could see. He held it close, smiled, and didn't say a word. Maisie left a piece of ribbon beside the curtain that evening. The blue one, frayed at one edge, soft from years in pockets. Then she whispered only once. And the curtain twitched, just once, in perfect reply. You don't need to believe in ghosts. Or magic rats. Or dreams soft enough to leave whisker prints behind your eyes. But you should know, the ones we love don't always leave the way we think. Sometimes they become something quieter. A breeze in a still room. A flick of a curtain with no window open. A gum wrapper folded just so in a pocket you thought was empty. Maisie never tried to explain it to people. Didn't point and say, that light moved because he came. Didn't show the notebook with the marble tucked between pages she'd never written. But she knew. And whenever the house creaked soft at dusk, she paused. Not to listen, to remember. Her son grew, as boys do, with knees scraped and stories taller than they used to be. And there were fewer games in the attic. Fewer bedtime mysteries. But sometimes, just as the sky stained purple and the spoons stood quietly in their drawer. He'd glance toward the curtain and say, he's here. Maisie never asked who. She already knew. Years passed the way stories do. Not with endings, just with softer chapters. People came. People went. The attic stayed. Sometimes closed. Sometimes open. Sometimes filled with the golden hush of someone not quite gone. Maisie told her granddaughter once. Not a story, but something smaller. If you ever see something that shouldn't be there, but it feels kind, don't be afraid. Even if it's just a shadow? Especially then. One winter evening, she sat alone. Tea warm, quilt tucked, lamp humming quietly with age. And she reached for a ribbon beneath the coaster, just out of habit. But it wasn't there. Instead, a small paper crown. Folded badly, edges chewed. She held it in her lap without speaking. Not crying, just smiling the way a house might, quietly, with windows wide. Later, as she passed the bookshelf, something gray darted by, not loud, not bold, just fast enough to be a choice. She bent to tie her slipper, heart steady, hands calm. And whispered, "Come out." Not loud, not with yearning, just a name she'd always known how to say. And from somewhere just between the moments, a sound like paws on soft wood answered. The attic had changed again. Not in how it looked, but in how it breathed. Maisie felt it the minute she stepped inside. The air held old warmth, that hush of something waiting not to be found, but felt. Her granddaughter, no taller than the windowsill, hugged her rabbit toy to her chest and whispered, "It smells like feathers up here." Maisie nodded. That's how it smells when someone left behind something soft. They were looking for a quilt. The one her mother had stitched during winter's long past, pieced from waving plaids and threadbare pajamas. It wasn't in the cedar trunk or behind the coats. She turned to check the far corner. Her granddaughter had already crawled ahead. "There's a box," the girl whispered. Maisie came closer. There, tucked where the shadows softened, was the shoebox. Not the first. Not the one she left. Another. Lid bowed. Covered in old stickers, stars and teacups and parts of initials faded into looped shapes. She opened it slowly. Inside, 4 marbles, 2 gray buttons, a note written on the back of a receipt. Still listening, Maisie felt her chest tighten, but gently. The way old lacing shoelaces sometimes pinched. Not cruel, just deep. She lifted the buttons, held them close. "I think he's still playing," she said quietly. The girl leaned against her. "Who?" Maisie didn't answer. She didn't need to. They folded the quilt together when they found it behind the bookshelf, hidden like it always had been, half in memory, half in dust. That night, Maisie sat by the attic window alone. Sugar cube on the sill. Blue thread coiled beside it. And then, so faint it could have been nothing, a thump above the insulation. Like tiny feet landing in place. She didn't look up, only reached into her pocket and placed a 5th marble beside the sugar. In the drawer the next morning, the thread was gone. And where she'd folded the edge of the quilt, now sat a single, perfect seed. Maisie began leaving colors, not objects, not notes. Just lengths of thread, one at a time, arrayed like a whisper's rainbow near the attic window. She didn't tell anyone, didn't even plan it, just gave. Red, blue, gold, green. Each morning, one thread would be gone. Some Tuesdays she skipped it, just to see. And those days, the house was still. Not cold, but waiting. So she returned to the ritual. The boy, now taller, less likely to mention dreams out loud, noticed, gently. "These for him?" he asked once, thumbing a strand of purple near the curtain hem. Maisie nodded. "I don't know if he needs them. But I think he sees them." He didn't ask more. That spring, blossoms came late. White petals in sudden bursts against still sleepy branches. One fell through the attic window screen. Maisie left it on the bookshelf. It was gone the next day. She smiled without telling anyone. Even her teacups felt warmer lately. At night, she sometimes heard it again, soft taps on attic beams, the hum of paws like memory in motion. She didn't rush to catch it. Just listened. When her granddaughter came to visit, she brought her a rock. Shaped like a heart. Not perfect. Not polished. Just real. Founded by the garden, the girl said. It was warm. Maisie held it gently. Later that night, she placed it beside the sugar cube. A trade. The next morning, a gum wrapper boat, folded tight, tucked beside the rock. No breeze. No sound. Only the quiet answer of being seen. Maisie traced thread through her fingers at dusk, eyes blinking slow. Still listening, she whispered. Not for noise, but for feeling. Hushed, held. That evening, a paper scrap appeared under her teacup. Drawn in faint pencil. A hill. A rat. And a small crown. She smoothed it flat with her palm. Didn't move it. Didn't frame it. Just left it where it had arrived. A thank you in a language only found in echo and dust. And at twilight, when light bowed in gold across the stairs, she stood at the attic door and smiled once into the hush. Not expecting, but remembering. Maisie found the note after breakfast. Folded twice, slipped between pages of the gardening book she hadn't opened in years. It was on the word, lavender, underlined faintly in pencil. No one else had been reading it. The note was made of thick paper. Tiny, uneven edges. Folded so tightly it unfolded whisper thin. It didn't say much. Even the quiet places remember. Maisie read it 3 times. Then closed the book softly and placed it back on the shelf, spine inward, like a secret turned toward the wall. She didn't speak of it. Only carried the feeling downstairs, into the kitchen light, into the sound of birds bickering in the trees. Later that afternoon, her granddaughter painted a picture on the back of a cereal box. It showed a ladder standing alone in the sky, step after step vanishing into clouds. It's for him, the girl said, if he ever wants to visit up. Maisie smiled, folded the box gently, placed it beside the old ribbon drawer without a word. At sunset, she lit a single candle, not for light but memory. The house creaked, the way old houses do when they remember someone. That night, the floor beside her bed bore tiny marks she hadn't seen earlier. Not pause, not quite, but pressure, a presence, as if something had stood there for a moment, deciding whether to wake her. She left the light off. Sat up, let the moon draw silver lines across the quilt. Then whispered, "You can come back, if all you did was forget how." A breath of wind answered, though the window was closed. In the morning, the sugar cube had become 2. Side by side, as if one had always been lonely. Maisie noticed first in the buttons. They weren't where they'd been. Not lost, just rearranged. The blue one had rolled beneath the window trim. The green one sat inside her teacup, dry and perfect. The red one, her favorite, was gone. She didn't panic. There was no need. That evening, she left a small note on the windowsill. In a handwriting only her younger self would have used. "Do you still collect things?" By morning, the note was gone. But in its place, a tiny pebble, smooth and cool. Round as a gumdrop. Not remarkable in any way, except it wasn't from here. Maisie hadn't walked near the river in months. That afternoon, she found a single toothpick poked gently into the corner of her knitting basket. Stuck through a thread of blue yarn, bent slightly, as if marking a hidden chapter. She chuckled. "You always did like to design your mazes." No one was home to hear. That night, instead of a candle, she lit 3 matches in a row, just enough for scent. 1 strike for the evenings he returned. 1 for the days he waited. 1 for all the times she hadn't known how to say thank you. The curtain stayed still, but when she opened the drawer near the scarf bin, someone had left 3 sunflower seeds in a perfect line. She whispered, "I didn't forget." And the room seemed to hush tighter, just for a second. Her granddaughter asked questions at breakfast. "Can hearts be like maps even if you don't know what they lead to?" Maisie nodded slowly. Yes. especially then. The girl returned later with a card she'd made. Folded from printer paper. Decorated with stamps. On the front, 5 circles. On the back, nothing. Inside, just one sentence. He remembered you. Maisie didn't ask who. She didn't need to. That evening she folded everything small, buttons, thread, the pebble, into a pouch and tucked it in the thimble drawer. She left it open, and smiled. The house sighed in its rafters. She swore she smelled cinnamon. Just for a moment, and when she stepped away from the drawer, it closed all by itself. The wind had turned warmer, peach soft, the kind that curled behind ears and hummed lullabies through the trees. Maisie was older now, all the way old, her granddaughter's words, not hers. She moved slower, slept a little less, but the attic was still her favorite place in the house. One April afternoon, she climbed the stairs without meaning to, feet carrying her before memory caught up. She reached the top and paused, not because of pain. Just to listen. The hush hadn't changed. Still thick with threadbare quiet. Still holding something you couldn't name unless you'd lost it once before. She stepped inside. On the floor. Nothing fancy. A paperclip. A dried seed. One pale gray thread curled like a shell. She smiled. Ran her finger along the bookshelf's edge, where dust gathered in kindness, not neglect. Near the window sat a small box. Not hidden. Not old. She opened it slowly. Inside, a pebble shaped like a heart. A folded scrap of picture book paper, edges chewed. A button she hadn't seen in 3 decades, green, nicked at the corner. And resting on top, her own drawing from childhood. The one Whisper had once tugged from behind a drawer. It looked exactly the same, right down to the smudge above the first star. Beneath it was a ribbon. Not hers this time. Blue satin. Folded carefully. She pressed it to her lips without knowing why. It smelled like cedar and upstairs rain. She closed the box and set it beside her. She didn't cry, but she did whisper, "I'm still here." And from somewhere, inside the walls, inside herself, it felt like someone nodded. Later, her granddaughter clambered up the stairs, rabbit toy swinging from one hand. Did he come? Maisie didn't hesitate. Yes. The girl tilted her head. Did he bring you anything? Maisie reached into her pocket. Pulled out the ribbon. He brought me back. That night, as moonlight painted the window frame silver. Maisie dreamed one last time. She stood on the quiet field. At the crest of the hill. And Whisper was there. Whole. Wild. Waiting. He didn't run ahead this time. He turned. Met her eyes. And waited for her words. Maisie bent once, softly. And said, "Come out. Cloud's king." So he did. And she followed.